Gypsy Tales, Story number 5 The Magic Pear. There once lived a king who had 4 sons. He was a wise king and was greatly loved by his people. One afternoon, while he was walking in the royal garden, he began to sneeze. Though at first he thought he had caught a cold, it was soon apparent that this was not the case. Nothing he tried could stop the sneezing. The best doctors of the land were summoned to the castle, but no treatment helped him. After this miserable affliction had continued for several weeks, the king became so weak that he was no longer able to get up from his bed. But on the very day that the doctors had given up all hope, an old gypsy appeared at the palace. "What can you do?" asked the royal guard, "when the best doctors in the world haven't been able to help?" But the gypsy was so adamant about seeing the king that the Lord Chamberlain gave him permission to visit the monarch. "Your Majesty," said the gypsy, "I have come to tell you that there is one cure for your terrible affliction." "You'd better tell me quickly," gasped the king, whose strength was ebbing away with every passing minute. "Somewhere in this world there is a magic pear. If you could just take one bite from it, you'd be cured." "And where can this pear be found?" the king asked incredulously. "That I cannot tell you," answered the gypsy. "However, I can assure you that if you send your 4 sons in search of it, one of them will find it." Having said this, the gypsy left the room. Although the king did not believe his visitor, he realized there was no harm in attempting to find this wonderful fruit. Hence he called for his 4 sons. "My sons," he said between sneezes, "I'm told that somewhere in this world there is a magic pear that can cure me. I ask that you find it for me. Whoever brings it back shall become heir to my kingdom." The 3 oldest sons were not pleased to hear this. They were lazy fellows who did not like the idea of having to make long and tiring trips. However, the youngest son was delighted to hear that there might yet be a cure for their father. That very same day, all 4 set out in search of the miraculous pear. The first brother rode towards the north, the second towards the south, the third towards the west, and the youngest towards the east. The oldest had traveled for nearly a week when he came to a land he had never seen before. It was a desolate country, and nowhere were houses or people to be seen. Just as he was wondering if he should turn back, he saw a gypsy approaching from the distance. "Good sir," said the gypsy, "I haven't eaten in days. Could you possibly give me a few pennies?" "I'll give you 1 penny," replied the prince, "if you'll tell me where I can find the magic pear." "Just keep going straight ahead," replied the gypsy, "and you'll soon come to a magic garden. There you'll see the pear. Pluck it from the branch and then leave the garden as quickly as you can." "You'd better be telling the truth," shouted the prince, and threw a penny at the gypsy's feet. After he had ridden for about a mile, he came to a great gate. He opened it and entered. Gold and silver flowers bloomed along a path that led straight towards a gigantic pear tree. He hurried to the tree. From one of its low branches there hung a single pear. He plucked it from the branch and placed the fruit in his pocket. But instead of rushing from the garden, as the gypsy had told him to do, he decided to fill his pockets with the flowers. No sooner had he touched the first gold flower than a heavy sleep overwhelmed him. When he awoke, he saw that the gypsy was standing next to him. "You're not worthy of a king's son. Therefore, I'll transform you into a raven. You shall keep this form until your father gets well." The gypsy then uttered some magic words, and the prince was immediately changed into a large, coal-black raven. A few days later, the second son, who had taken the southern route, met the same gypsy. When he was asked for some money, the proud and vain prince treated the gypsy no better than his brother had. But the gypsy told this son, too, about the magic garden and the special fruit. The prince did not succeed in leaving the garden with the healing fruit, and he also attempted to steal some of the gold and silver flowers. The gypsy then placed a similar curse on him, and in a second he was transformed into a coal-black raven. The third brother, who had traveled west, fared no better. Within an hour of having met the gypsy, he made the same mistake and was also changed into a raven. When the youngest son met the gypsy a few days later, he immediately dismounted from his horse. "I can see that you're hungry," he said. "Here, have some of my bread." Then he gave the gypsy all of the money he had in his pockets and continued on his way. He had not ridden 20 yards when he heard the gypsy calling, "Come back, young prince. I know what you're seeking, and there is very little time left. If your father does not take a bite from that pear today, all will be lost." Then he told the prince what had to be done to obtain the magic fruit. Upon entering the garden, the prince rushed to the tree and plucked the pear from the branch. Then he turned around and, looking neither to his right nor to his left, he made his way back to the gate. As soon as he was outside of the garden, he saw that the gypsy was waiting for him. "Here, take this branch," said the gypsy. "After your father has eaten from the pear, take a walk in the courtyard of the palace. 3 ravens will settle at your feet. Before they can fly away, touch them with this branch." Having said this, the gypsy placed a hand on the prince's forehead. Instantly the lad found himself outside of his father's palace. He ran to the chamber and gave the king the pear. By this time the king had become so weak that he could barely open his mouth. But as soon as the magic fruit touched his lips, he regained some strength and then took a huge bite. Lo and behold! The sneezing ceased immediately. Color came back to the king's tired face and strength returned to his body. But before he could say anything to his son, the prince had already left the chamber and was on his way to the courtyard. No sooner had he arrived there than 3 large, coal-black ravens settled at his feet. The prince touched them with a special branch, and the birds were transformed back into his brothers. That day there was a great celebration at the castle. The king announced that the youngest son would be the heir to the kingdom, and even though the 3 older brothers were somewhat jealous, they were grateful that he had freed them from their terrible curse. When it came time for the prince to take charge of the kingdom, he appointed his brothers to positions of great importance, and they, having learned their lesson, became fine and just administrators. But even today, in a remote section of northeastern Hungary, many peasants wonder, whenever they see unusually large ravens flying over their wheat fields, if these birds really are birds, or might not they be something or someone else. End of story number 5.